The night a rookie cop pointed a gun at a 70-year-old man's chest over a loaf of bread, I realized the system I had sworn to serve could kill a man like my father all over again, and nobody important would lose a minute of sleep. That was the moment my badge stopped being just a job and started feeling like a dare. It was raining on Palmer Street when Officer Ethan Carter's hands shook on his Glock, and Louis Monroe whispered he just wanted to go home soaked, clutching a torn paper bag while bread floated down the gutter like the punchline to some cruel joke. And I, Special Agent Maya Lane, had 3 seconds to decide if I was going to keep my head down like a good agent in a rotten structure, or step into that beam of headlights and drag 50 years of buried truth into the open where it could finally hit back. Carter was all nerves and swagger, you know, the type, fresh academy shine, chest puffed, barking, "Hands on your head, don't move," even though Louis already had his empty hands up and his front door was 5 feet away, porch light humming, slippers on his feet, not exactly cartel energy. "I live right there," Louis said, a little confused, a lot tired, and Carter grabbed his collar anyway, slammed him on the hood so hard I heard ribs complain. I flashed my credentials, rain dripping off the plastic, "FBI, that's enough." And he gave me that look, the one that says you're not part of my chain of command, you're part of my problem. Step back, agent suspect's non-compliant, because suspect always comes before human in the script they drill. Then something slipped from Louis's coat, hit the asphalt with a small metal tap that cut through the storm. A scratched silver badge, old military style, 3 faint words carved along the edge. He signed for truth. My pulse spiked. I had seen that phrase once buried in a sealed case file labeled Red Gate parked over my father's name before the document vanished behind an access-denied wall, and every mentor suddenly forgot how to answer questions. I grew up as the girl whose dad supposedly signed off on a massacre, listening to whispers about how I only wore a badge to fix optics, getting the kind of smiles that never reach the eyes. So trust me, that little circle of metal on the pavement felt like a dead man grabbing my ankle. I told Carter again, slow and clear, he had no weapon, no warrant, and if he pulled that trigger, his own body cam would bury him. "And I am not lying for you," I added, and I meant it in a way that scared both of us. His jaw clenched finger tight on the trigger for one long breath, the whole street holding its lungs. Then he shoved Louis away, told him to get inside, and brushed past me with, "You just made a mistake, Agent Lane." The patrol car rolled off red and blue reflections, sliding over puddles like nothing had happened. But something had. Next morning, my access was under review. My supervisor smiling too much, warning me not to personalize field encounters. My searches on Red Gate locked, which only confirmed the badge and the file were tied together like bone and scar. So instead of going home, I went to County General, followed the name through 3 different clipboards until I found Louis in a corner room hooked to a monitor, eyes still sharp enough to cut. I held up his badge. "Tell me about this," I said. "Tell me about Red Gate and Marcus Lane." For a second, his whole face changed, like he was seeing someone who'd been late for a long time. "Your daddy had a backbone," he whispered. "He refused the order, they burned him for it, not the other way around." 1 sentence and 20 years of shame cracked. He told me Red Gate was on American soil. Black families penned in and fired on for a stress test, numbers on a chart where names used to be a handful of officers refused, carved those words as a promise, hid pieces of proof inside those badges because paper could be shredded, but metal was stubborn. "Inside that badge is a voice," he said, tapping the crack. "I kept it 50 years waiting on somebody who'd listen. And of course, as soon as someone listened, the machine woke up." I stepped out for a nurse when his breathing turned, and when we came back, he was gone. Federal transfer signatures, nobody recognized, cameras offline for maintenance nurses already told not to worry. Yeah, that happened. That was the end of the version of me who trusted our process more than my gut. I drove to my father's old house, the place I'd avoided because even the floorboards had opinions about him, went straight to the crooked rug under his desk, pried up the loose board, and there it was, a metal box like he'd meant for me to find it the whole time. Inside, an 8mm reel, a sliver of microfilm, and an empty round slot that fit the broken core from Louis's badge. When I clicked them together, it locked with a tiny sound that felt like a door closing behind me, and another one opening that I couldn't unsee. I set up his dusty projector, pulled the curtains, and let the past play. Grainy images of Red Gate Hill civilians behind wire soldiers on edge, then my father stepping between them, shouting that the order was unlawful, voice shaking but standing. Over the radio, a young but unmistakable Doyle, the same man who now shook hands on camera and talked about integrity, saying, "If Hale will not authorize, we will secure his signature and proceed." Frame jump a forged signature under my father's name, then muzzle flashes and people falling, then static like the tape itself couldn't stand to watch. I sat there realizing my father died clean and someone else climbed a ladder built on his neck and that someone was still signing my performance reviews. That does something to you. I brought Ethan Carter in, dropped the reel. The audio and his Palmer Street footage in front of him made him watch the line from Redgate to his shaking gun. At first he tried to armor up jokes, say, "This is above my pay grade," but bravado doesn't survive side by side with dead civilians and a forged order. When he heard Doyle's voice and saw himself yanking Lewis by the collar, his face went gray. "My dad served under that man," he said, "came home broken, never said why." "Now you know." I told him, "What you do with it is on you." To his credit, he slid me his raw body cam before anyone could review it. No speech, just, "I won't be part of that." That was the twist for me. Not just that Doyle was the architect of Red Gate, but that the kid who almost pulled the trigger chose to cross the line the other way. We tried protocol for about a minute, sent a sanitized summary to an internal office, and the answer came back in silence and pressure. My keycard flagged a memo about unauthorized queries. Ethan moved to a corner desk, an anonymous text lighting my phone. "Stop digging Red Gate." So I did the wrong thing that felt like the only right thing. I went outside. I called Malik Harper, independent reporter, professional Thorn, the guy agencies tell each other not to talk to. We met in a cheap diner, rain on the glass Carter in a hoodie, pretending not to listen over cold coffee. I laid it out. Badge film, audio, forged signature near shooting. No theatrics, just proof. Malik stared and finally said, "You know this could end me." And I said, "If it stays buried, it ends a lot more than you know what I mean?" We set a time. That night was no Hollywood production, just a cramped room over a laundromat, humming machines below us, one camera, one clean shot. Malik opened the stream, introduced me as an active federal agent with evidence of a 50-year cover-up, and I told the story the way I'm telling you now, no script, just what happened. Then we rolled the footage, laid Lewis's badge and Carter's video next to Doyle's old voice until the pattern was too loud to ignore. For a few minutes the chat flew. Outrage, denial, old vets saying they remembered rumors, and then the main feed went black. Somebody hit a big red button, but by then thousands had already screen recorded and mirrored it, sending it to corners of the internet no memo can reach, and killing the stream just added gasoline. Within a day, Redgate and Doyle were everywhere. The Justice Department announced an inquiry, the Bureau promised transparency, and Doyle got on a secure line to tell me I'd misunderstood operational necessity and was endangering stability. I played his own orders back to him, the ones he'd assumed were buried in tin boxes and failing memories, and listened to him run out of words. A week later, he resigned for health reasons. They walked boxes out of his office on live TV. They'll argue details for years, but people saw enough. A month later, I stood on Redgate Hill, now a memorial instead of a ghost story, candles along the slope, families saying names that had been hidden in footnotes. I set the silver badge on the stone marked for Lewis Monroe. Played a clip from my father's recorder we found in that box, his voice rough but clear. "If justice falls silent, it'll be your voice that brings it back." And yeah, I cried because for once his name wasn't a warning in the hallway. Carter filmed quietly. Malik watched the crowd hold their candles like a field of small verdicts, and for a minute it felt like maybe this was what winning looked like. Not fireworks, just people finally knowing what was done in their name. Then the curator handed me an envelope left at the door. Inside, a photo of 3 young men at Redgate, my father, a young Lewis, and a third man with his face half-turned wearing a badge marked D14. On the back, in neat block letters, some directives were never retired. No threat, no demand, just a reminder that every time we drag one truth into the light, someone else is already building a new shadow. That's the part nobody likes to say out loud, but it's real. So if you're still here, I want to hear you on this. Do you think we were right to blow it open, even if it cracked faith in the badge? Or should we have protected the image of order and swallowed it like generations before us? If you'd been on Palmer Street that night with Carter's hand shaking and Lewis begging to breathe, would you have stepped in or told yourself it wasn't your problem? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Disagree if you need to tell me what you've seen where you live, the good, the ugly, the moments you spoke up or stayed quiet. And if you believe justice only keeps breathing when ordinary people refuse to shut up, Share this, hit subscribe, send it to that one friend who thinks their voice doesn't matter, because I have seen what silence can do and I am not interested in going back to that.